All right, just waiting for some few more folks to filter in, but I just want to say hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another exciting collaboration between the Denver Streets Partnership and Shared Studios and the Denver Streets for People Summit. Shared Studios brings together a diverse group of global perspectives for transformative conversations in a mix of both virtual and immersive environments. Today, we're happy to be partnering with the Denver Streets for People Summit. And today we're also bringing together a group of experts from the US and the Netherlands to help us to reimagine and activate public space in new and innovative ways. I'm Dr. Brandon Furter. I'm the Director of Global Community for Shared Studios. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank some of our sponsors, the Denver Streets for People Summit sponsors, the Denver Community Active Living Coalition, which is a grant-funded program in association with the Denver Department of Transportation and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the Denver Streets Partnership, who we've been working a lot with, a coalition of community organizations advocating for people-friendly streets. You can read more about these organizations in your program, and I encourage you to stay active and involved with these amazing groups beyond this particular conversation and beyond this summit itself. I also encourage you to attend some additional panels as part of this summit. There will be a full day of panels tomorrow, including another collaboration between Denver Streets for People and Shared Studios. We'll be engaging new and creative ways that people are moving through urban environments with guests from Bolivia, Sweden, Berlin, and the US, in the US West. So please stay tuned for all of that. Before we welcome our guests today, I just wanted to kind of give you all an overview of the format. We'll have a pretty kind of free-flowing conversation with our guests for about the first 35 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from all of you who are attending. I do encourage you, however, that if something comes up or strikes your interest during the conversation, please feel free to put that into the chat as it arises. I will be monitoring the chat throughout the conversation, and if you ask a question early on, I'll return to that question during the question and answer portion. I really encourage you to attend. We have three amazing experts here who can share that expertise with all of you, and we're looking forward to hearing the questions that you have and the things that you'd like to learn. Also, just so you all know, you will be muted through the duration of the conversation. Only the panelists will be unmuted. And so just keep note of that. Also, if you have any technical issues throughout the webinar, please go ahead and contact. On the back end of this is my colleague Emma, and you can contact her at emma@sharedstudios.com. She can assist you with any technical needs that you might have. All right, let's go ahead and meet our guests. We'll get right to it. I want to start with Eric Lazari, who's the Strategic Partnerships Director for the Civic Center Conservancy, a not-for-profit partner of the historic Civic Center Park. For some reason, Eric, I'm telling you, I struggle saying that for some reason. It's that alliteration.
So good.
Civic Center Park, which has helped activate nearly 200 days per year, bringing life to the space and emotionally connecting Denver residents, workers, and visitors to its most important public space. Well, thank you for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it.
Good to be here.
Next up, we have Ron van der Sterren. He started his career as a journalist at Dutch broadcaster VPRO and has been working in the area of pop and classical music as well as in educational environments. He is the creator of the regional pop venue Papa Pop. I get that one wrong too, Ron. I tell you every time, Papa Pop. And has been reimagining large public gatherings such as concerts in response to the COVID-19 crisis. Thanks for joining us, Ron. I know it's late in the Netherlands. It's after midnight, so we're happy to have you.
Thank you. It's a perfect time for these things.
Excellent. See, it's the rock and roller in you. It's the music guy in you. Up late, up all night, sleep all day. Finally, we have Archie Lee Coates IV. He is the co-founder and partner at PlayLab Inc., an extremely multidisciplinary Los Angeles-based creative studio founded with Jeff Franklin in 2009. He is director of Plus Pool, a plus-shaped water filtering floating swimming pool designed to filter New York's East River, making it possible for New Yorkers and their visitors to swim in clean river water, essentially reactivating the water as a space for the people. Thank you so much for joining us, Archie. And I think I made it sound like you might be in New York, but you're in LA, so it's a little bit earlier for you. We appreciate your joining us today.
Thank you.
So I guess I want to start the conversation today with just kind of a general question. In the session that we held yesterday, and I think on everybody's mind is the impact of the current pandemic on the urban environment. There's been a lot of talk, and I don't know if it's fact-based talk, but I know there's been a lot of media and a lot of talk, particularly out of the New York area, of people leaving urban environments for more rural areas, for more open spaces. And so I guess I'm just interested in folks that are doing work in cities and kind of reimagining what public space in cities might look like. How do you think coronavirus is changing people's relationship with the urban environment or with public space in general? And I guess what I'm getting at here is, are those kind of, do you think that those things are true, that people are going to start abandoning cities, or are there ways that we might reimagine public space and make it more welcoming even when there are lots of people around? I'll start with you, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. It's a fascinating question. I remember at the beginning of all this back in April, and I was having conversations with a couple colleagues, and we recognize public space has this opportunity. Public space has this moment for communities that are not recognizing the value of their public space. I think everybody appreciates, having a park nearby, or a street that's closed, or even, a sidewalk to go down. And, restaurateurs, are loving the opportunity in Denver right now to spill into their streets. And so, I think it made us all realize, how important it is. And I really hope that's one of the lasting legacies, is that, whenever there is a return to something, we realize how important our public spaces are, and we continue to invest in them, and we continue to use them because they are part of our critical infrastructure. We've also talked about how this is pandemic number one. Are we entering into a pandemic era? Do we really need to be shifting, how we exist? And, Denver, 300 days of sunshine, gonna have 70-degree days in December and January, as well as a little bit of snow. We have to do a better job of figuring out, how we get people outdoors, during the winter. And we know they will. They have the clothes to go up into the mountains, so they can use those clothes down in the city as well.
Ron, how about you? How do you think this moment is kind of changing people's relationships to their public space and to the built environment?
I think I hope it does change the relationship. But what we've seen is when the pandemic hit us and we had our own version of the lockdown, and the streets were quiet, people actually reclaimed public space. It was a new way of looking at the street, and it was not this bloodline for cars, but it was actually a lot of space that you can walk on and play on. And because a lot of people stayed close to their environment, to their own houses, they reclaimed the public spaces in their neighborhoods. And I actually really love that. And I hope it's something that that has stick to the brains, and that we try to keep that once this is over, because I still have hope that we get beyond this.
Yes, I had a friend of mine message me that the other day, this very hopeful message, and I was like, "Wow, she's much more hopeful than I am." So I appreciate your hope, Ron. Archie, you've come up with innovative ways to engage public space with Plus Pool. So I'm really interested in how you respond to what you think, how people's relationships are changing, and what you think that might look like going forward.
Totally. Well, I mean, it's a great question. I think, lots of things are happening right now, and I think a lot of people are confused, and the dust is still settling and will be settling for a long time when it comes to design and the design of the environment. And even prior to now, especially in New York City, there's an incredible contested debate amongst privately owned public space and how we interact with public space and how it's funded and built and designed and accessible and all these things. But I think one of the most important things that at least I'm seeing is that people are questioning their relationship with public space in a much more, active way. I think to Ron's point, people are starting to reclaim space in ways that maybe they didn't prior. With our project with Plus Pool, that was the intention from day one, which was how can we get people to think about their relationship with public space and to take action with it. You know, the project is a large project, but it's really designed to sort of change minds and hearts and kind of open up their ability to think differently about space, which was our goal from the beginning. So I think hopefully people will continue to do so. And I think the organizations that are behind projects like that are going to be more in a position of power than they have been previously.
Can you, for our attendees, can you talk a little bit about Plus Pool, provide them a bit more information about it? And I love the way that you linked it to that was the original intention, was to change that relationship with public space. And I know that you've also mentioned that it's to change kind of the people's relationship to the environment even more generally. And so I would love to hear a bit more about Plus Pool and
Sure.
How it started.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a designer. I studied architecture. I met my business partner there. And, you know, traditionally as a designer, you don't design large scale public space until you're, you know, much later in your career as an architect. And so it's pretty outlandish to propose projects at that scale, especially in New York. When we got to New York, we moved to New York out of architecture school, you didn't realize that public space is not built by the public. It's not built necessarily by or proposed by the public. These are, it's kind of a very complicated system, actually. And so we launched Plus Pool as an idea to get people dreaming about swimming in the river. So we designed a literally plus-shaped, four-winged pool that is an Olympic-sized swimming pool that would float on the East River, but it would also simultaneously clean the East River through a filter mechanism in the walls of the pool that had not yet been invented. Because it was the beginning of Kickstarter and it was the beginning of incredible amounts of back and forth on Instagram, we saw incredible amount of support within a couple of weeks, and we had funding from the largest engineering firm in the world by week 2 to test the feasibility of the filtration system. So we spent the better part of a decade designing and patenting this filtration system, the pool itself. And as my partner, Dongping Long, who is a co-founder of the project, says, it's architecture backwards. And now we are working with the city of New York and the Economic Development Corporation, who issues the capital and builds projects like this in cities like New York, to actually build it in the city, which is phenomenal. And I think we never actually expected that it would happen like that, but it is sort of a unicorn in that way.
Yeah, and I want to come back to, in a bit, I want to come back to how each of you have worked with various stakeholders in order to achieve some of these kind of reimagining of public spaces. But Ron, can you explain to the attendees some of the creative ways, you know, a little bit of your background, kind of organizing music venues and concerts, and how you have responded to this moment to kind of reimagine what's going on and some of the challenges you're facing and some of the opportunities that you see for public spaces for stuff like concerts right now?
So what we've been doing at Pop Pop is what we do is actually we organize events, concerts at different locations. So we don't have our own venue. We travel and we take the space that we seem fit for any event that we come up with. And we actually started this year. We started in March the 1st, and March 12th, our national government called out the lockdown. So before we actually got started, we fell silent, and that was like, what now? So we were immediately pushed into coming up with doing something else. And so we started doing silly things, and it came from the belief that it is important to have culture around. And so we fled to the forest. There's not much forest, but in the city where we live around Wageningen, we actually have some trees clutched together, and we tend to call that forest in the Netherlands. And I just organized concerts there for 3 visitors at a time. And it's ridiculous, but at the same time, it was exactly what the city needed. It felt like resisting and not giving up, and from there we started to move around and scaled up a bit. But I want to get back to shortly to the public spaces discussion. We have some forest, and it's publicly accessible, but you're actually not allowed to do anything else than have a walk there. You can't do concerts there. You know, it's all like it's protected nature area. And so what happened during COVID is that the city realized that difficult times need a different approach. So we actually got more space to do things that we were normally never allowed to do. And once we realized that, we really try to focus on that. Okay, we see a local government that is struggling with how to deal with it. We see an industry that, you know, the event industry, I was saying I was hopeful, but the event industry, I'm quite pessimistic. If we have to stick to these rules, it's very difficult. But we see everyone struggling, and we also saw the government trying to help us, and they just didn't know how. So we took the opportunity to build up trust with them, and reassure them that we are sensible people. We try to do the good thing. And once we got the trust, we also got the trust to go to the border, to see how far you can go. And that resulted, actually, in August, we had a 1-month festival in the park, and we were allowed to have 250 people. We set up to have them, and we had like 4 days in a row, a concert, silent disco, different kinds of performances, and once the city actually saw that we did keep a promise in trying to manage this in a sensible way, we just got more and more room. And so for me, that is the continuous search in how far can we stretch up within reasonable borders.
Right. Well, and
does
Eric,
does it make sense what I say? I'm just like,
no, definitely. And I think that, and one of the things that I also want to return to is again, this idea of how you've all worked with so many different stakeholders and how you've achieved the things that you have working under those constraints. But Eric, I know that over the last 9 years, you've helped to activate the park. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about kind of the strategies that you've used to activate that space and how you see those strategies kind of moving into the future to respond to this particular moment.
Yeah, in Civic Center, our first foray, 10, 12 years ago was we were a leader in food trucks in Denver, and we gave the food trucks a place to park. And I think historically, and you look worldwide, food and beverage is a wonderful activator of space. We had enough room and enough space to put together a pretty unique food truck event with Civic Center Eats. And so things like that. And, really, the space has historically been this wonderful architectural campus. It's a National Historic Landmark, one of 2 in the country of a really city beautiful park. And so it's historically had the architecture, and it's historically been the place where large festivals would come. So hundreds of thousands of people would be in Civic Center. And what we've really tried to change the focus through doing things like movies and fitness classes, the things that you see work in parks is how do we integrate it into the daily lives of people? Because here we have 12 acres that sits in the heart of our city, but it was used extensively 8 weekends a month or 8 weekends a year for some of the large festivals that coming in, and then you wouldn't have a reason to go. And so really what we've been doing is, inspiring people to use it and integrate it into their daily life. So come down and have lunch, do a workout, see some art, different things like that, gives you a reason to be there.
But Eric, what happened with all these big festivals during COVID? I mean, it's all gone now, right? Canceled.
Correct. The festivals went away this year, and they didn't try to scale down and do something differently, but try to keep on being alive. The festivals that happened in Civic Center, no. Some of them went virtual, and the Pride Fest, one of the largest ones in the world, happens in Civic Center every June. They went virtual with a parade and a festival, but physical footprint in Civic Center, there's not, and even in Denver, there's a lot of the events have not pivoted into going into public space, and it's partly the rules and the financials around accommodating those rules, but what we have seen is the commercial entities, the restaurants and shops move out into public space here in Denver.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Ron, you mentioned that you had to kind of gain the trust of city officials that you were going to, activate this space in a way that was going to be safe for people. And I'm wondering, and Archie, you talked a little bit about how the whole process kind of worked backwards from the way that it normally would. Archie, if you could, I'm interested in, what it was like who are the stakeholders that you were working with, and what was that process like, and is there something that we can learn for how we move to activate spaces in the future from the work that you've done and the people that you've interacted with?
Sure. I mean, I can't speak for all projects, of course, but our project is a lot similar to the process by which the High Line was developed. And Joshua David, one of the co-founders of the High Line, is one of the leaders on our board of directors and has been at our 501c3 since the beginning, and have learned a lot. But I talk about it all the time like a black hole. Really, it's like poking around in a box without any lights on and not totally knowing, who the stakeholder is. And then they tell you to go over here, and then they tell you to go over there, but that person's not telling you the full story. We kept feeling so naive and idealistic, but in reality, the information is not clear, and it felt like it never would be. And that sounds kind of dark, but it's the challenge, and it's kind of exciting in that way. But to be specific, on the city side, you have the mayor's office, the deputy mayor's office, the borough president's offices, the city council members, community boards in each district, and then you have communities like the New York City Public Housing Authority, in which there are tons of people that don't have access or equity in places like swimming pools or public parks, or don't feel like they don't have what a lot of the rest of the city has. So we spend a lot of time engaging them, community boards, the city, and you have different modes of communication for each. And then you have a greater public does definitely not know how projects like this are built, nor how dollars are spent or whatnot. And you have a lot of negative people and positive people. And so the job of a project like this, or an organization, community organization, is really feeling all of it and weighing it relatively equally and speaking to it all of the time. But the stakeholders sort of continue to evolve. And then you have the science side and the tech side. And for our project specifically, we have the Department of Health and the Department of Environmental Conservation, which are all big players. And then you have the Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers and a whole slew of groups. And it's a lot of chicken before the egg to get one simple act done, which is swimming in a clean river that was already the public's to begin with. So I'd imagine it's the same with a lot of different types of projects. Ours is pretty complicated given the technology and the amount of pollution in the water, which it's like 27 billion gallons of raw sewage are dumped into the East River each year illegally. So there's a ton of speed bumps.
do people, so how do you get people to believe that it's actually clean? If you tell me this, it's like, okay, I'm not going to swim
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, you know, the branding of the project is almost as successful as the design of the project, which is to lead with positivity and communication and transparency, which is what we don't find in a lot of those other stakeholders, to be quite honest. So we just sort of try to lead by example and deal with all of the communication that sort of comes up. But yeah, we have a giant part of our website that's just a timeline, literally every single milestone transparently written like an article, like a news article, an editorial. So that if you really spent the time, you could dive in and figure out every move we made, when we made it, why we made it, and what the results were. We're not trying to hide anything. It's extremely difficult, and that's okay. We don't. Again, one of our co-founders, he says it all the time. You know, this feels like it could be a success if other people end up getting involved in their city at any sort of level, remotely close to the way that we're looking at our cities. And now that I'm in Los Angeles, there's a whole other slew of issues in public spaces. It's like you have beaches and you have beautiful parks within neighborhoods, and a lot of those are being destroyed by fires. But there isn't really a semblance of public art or gathering for that purpose. It's a strange city in that regard, the way that it was built and the way that it continues to be built. So it's I find it just a super interesting problem to solve as a designer.
Archie, we actually got a question from someone in the audience, and it's in the chat. I'll read it to you, but if you want to refer back to it, it's there. But you know, what's more effective when it comes to getting approval to activate public space? Social media pressure, traditional, you know, you said transparency worked really well, but you also mentioned that, you know, the marketing strategy was probably, you know, played a huge role in that. So yeah, I think this is an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And actually, Amy, you probably assume what the answer is, and that is definitely social media is much more effective. And when I say social media, it's really the public. When the public becomes vocal and has the correct reason to be vocal and they're educated properly, the city of New York, in this case, really has no choice but to respond to it. We did a massive campaign, actually with Heineken. The brand director of Heineken approached us and said, hey, this is cool. What can we do to help? And we said $2 million. But on top of that, get behind some initiatives. And one of the initiatives that we did was a campaign called Swim in the River. And it's just swimintheriver.com. It's an online petition. You put in your name, you pledge that you want to swim in the river with or without plus pool, just that you want to get into the river cleanly, legally, and safely. And within a few weeks, we had 10,000 signatures that we delivered in print in a giant stack to Mayor de Blasio, who, you know, is kind of a dud when it comes to these sort of things, to be quite honest. But we delivered those 10,000 signatures, and it definitely ignited a fire within City Hall. And the people that actually do work underneath him, including the deputy mayor's offices, like Alicia Glenn, et cetera, they started to take action. And then we had a regularly occurring weekly meeting with the city of New York. And we were walking up the steps of City Hall every week. And it wasn't just the petition, it was everything else associated with it. Heineken launched a giant campaign. We had ads running in Tribeca Film Festival. We did an actual commercial in which the co-founders are sitting at a table dreaming about this project and drawing it on camera. We had a lot of things cooking for that first initial wave, and we still do. They can't ignore things like that. Even with our galas, which are a very necessary part of fundraising and events for nonprofits here in America, you know, our galas hit a little different than other galas, you know, and they feel like real community activism at our galas, really like a tidal wave. And we don't separate those out from the city. We make sure that the city is there so they can hear it loud and clear. And I think all of those things together have been really effective. And then that way, when we show up with a giant proposal or ask to bend the rules or change the way that regulation is done within the city of New York for the benefit of the public, you know, they're more apt to hear it. But regardless, when you're trying to make real big change, it's extremely hard. I will tell you one quick story to Amy's question. I gave a talk first year of Plus Bowl, 2011, with the director of the Department of Transportation. And he told this story about this family that wanted to close down their street in Brooklyn for a couple hours on one weekend out of the year to have a big party for the block. The Department of Transportation said, you know what? We have 2 staff in the entire office, so we would have never known that you wanted this. You can have it. The next year they came back with photos and said, this was amazing. Can we have the whole weekend? They said yes. They came back the next year and said, could we have the whole street shut down for this time period? They said yes. After 5 years of doing this event successfully, they have a permanently shut down street, which is now a public park. And that was for some people that were naive, that had positivity and goodwill, going to the city of New York and saying, I want this thing. And the right people were there at the right time to say, okay, you know, we can do it, you know, and we need to do it because we don't have enough eyes around the city. It's just too big. It's too wild. It's too difficult. And that was really encouraging for me. I wish that was as simple for Plus Pool, but I think that it's a good story for a lot of other projects that need to be happening simultaneously. It's not about one project, it's about all projects happening. I
really resonate to that last story because the first story, it sounds great, but also so big. And the last one really, I see it here too, that you can do a lot of things. And if you get your local community and the city council and you give them a good answer so they can, you know, on the outside have a story for the public, they're quite willing to give you space and help you. And the story you just said with the street lockdown in this city and in many other cities in the Netherlands, it's actually if you want to have a street party, you can ask the city and you also get some money to organize it. And and because they're really happy if people get active in this way, so it's a good story. I think it's good to say it out loud to inspire people to not be scared to go to officials with any idea that you have. You know, I mean, things are complicated often, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. And especially in these times, I think there's a lot of space for experiment.
I would so concur with this is a time of experimentation. And I think one of the things that I've seen be effective is, you know, be iterative. To take RG's story, you know, 5 years ago, those people probably would have loved to have a street closed in front of their house and things like that. And I don't know if it was an intentional strategy in any way, shape, or form, but, you know, the one weekend led to multiple, or one day led to a weekend, led to multiple weeks and led to things. And so, you know, in Civic Center, you know, we're constantly trying, we're constantly testing. We did comedy show on Tuesday night in Civic Center Park. Socially distanced comedy outdoors should not have worked. It maybe kind of didn't work. A little bit, but at the same time, 70 people walked away super, super happy because they got to smile, they got to laugh. We got to pay 10 comedians to come out on the stage, and you know, it's absolutely a success. And you know, in non-COVID times, I would have never tried that. I would have never invested the money and time to bring 70 people to the Greek Theater and do that. And so I think it's important when you're in these spaces and working with stakeholders is maybe have an end goal of what you want to, but what are the iterative steps to get there? What is the first experiment? And maybe sometimes that experiment, tactical urbanism, is done without the permission. It is shown, you know, I can't do that sometimes with, you know, because we're official partner of the city, but citizens can do that and citizens can lead that. And, you know, that's where you can start to demonstrate change. I think it's, if anything I've learned with working with the city is I have to be able to show them not only the demand is there with the public pressure and things like that, but show them how it works. You know, I get to think 24/7, 365 about Civic Center Park. A parks department here in Denver has to worry about, you know, 200 plus parks, and their budgets are getting cut constantly. So it's, you know, continue to dream, continue to iterate, continue to experiment, I think is key to, you know, getting your foot in the door with a lot of these things.
You know, one thing that came up, Archie, as you were talking about this, and I've heard it across all of you, is it's empowering the people to kind of demand the things that they want. But Archie, you said that it's important that they have the correct information and that they're coming to officials, you know, with information that is reasonable. And this kind of came up with you as well, Eric. I'm wondering, how do we ensure that? Especially when we think about, maybe this is a big question. I mean, when we think about the way social media is often used to communicate incorrect information, how do we really inform publics in a way that they can then take that information to officials and enact some change in terms of altering public space?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thought, and you know, I think teaching people how to interact with their government, I think is something that, you know, goes beyond public space. And I think one of the things, you know, roles we've really embraced at the Conservancy is to be that conduit, is to be that go-between. It's, you know, I've got 10 years working with the Parks Department and Public Works and, sorry, Dottie, and, you know, all these other city departments. And, you know, I'll use the comedy that I just talked about. The comedians who want to perform outside have no idea how to start that process and do a show. But we were able to provide an opportunity. Fitness studios that, you know, their members were telling them they're not going to go inside to a studio. We had relationships with them, and, you know, we were able to broker that relationship and be the conduit that, you know, already has the trust of the city built. And so then, you know, this studio can keep their membership going when they wouldn't otherwise go into it, and they're doing yoga classes 4 days a week in the park right now. And so I think, you know, my experience is more being the conduit. The conduit is and the facilitator, as opposed to, I would love to be able to rile up the masses like you did, Archie, and, you know, get 10,000 signatures about what we should do with our space.
Yeah, but you have the exact right mindset, and as we're seeing now, you know, a project like ours is not what the city is going to invest $40 million in, and we had to really look, you know, deep within, and this is, you know, a testament to Josh David from the Highline, who challenged us way before the pandemic to say, you as the executive director of this nonprofit have to ask yourself, what is the role of Friends of Plus Pool, the 501c3, if the project, the physical $40 million floating pool, does not happen, or does not happen for a long time? And that, as an artist and a designer, that shook me, you know. And we came up with a plan and a mission and a vision that we were really starting to fulfill, but COVID, I think, really pushed it into another gear. And now we realize that the mentality of the project is more key than the physicality of the project, that we need to be a platform, or, you know, as you were kind of referring to, an enabler or a conduit for other activity, community along the public space lines. It's not necessarily just about swimming or environment even, or technology. It's really about people, equality, and equity. And the more that people spend time with each other, especially people that are incredibly diverse from each other, in a setting like that, and feel protected and invited and loved, then I think cities as a whole become healthier. We already know who already has access to public space or feels welcome in public space. We all know who doesn't in this country. And the ones that especially have access or equity in public space need to be fighting real damn hard for the people that don't. And I now realize that more than ever.
I want to, unless Ron or Eric, you want to add to that, we have another question. This one specifically for you, Eric, a Denver-related question about the current status of shared streets in Denver. Can you speak to that current status and the challenge to keep it going?
since I deal primarily with parks, I'm certainly not or specifically with one park, certainly not my level of expertise. But, you know, for those people that aren't in Denver, you know, Denver early on in the pandemic, if I remember reading the articles correctly, was leading the way with the number of miles of street closed to give people more public space and recognize the need. You know, I think the debate right now is the tension of when do they go back? There's a road I used to drive on every single day when I go to pick up my kids from daycare after work, that I know there's been a big debate as they moved the barricades to make it easier for the emergency vehicles to get, and all of a sudden it turned from a shared street, and it's shared street still in name right now, but you know, you have a lot more cars on it now, and cars going at quick rates of speed, and you know, so people no longer want to use it to bike or walk or things like that. And so I think that's the tension we're going to have, you know, in our communities. It's, you know, as they continue to still be auto-centric and car-centric, you know, it eliminates these places for people. And, you know, it scares me a little bit, frankly, as to how quickly that all just happened. And, you know, we need more public space in Denver. In our downtown core, we have, you know, several large parks, but people don't have that thing right outside their door within 1 or 2 blocks. And, you know, that's such a huge thing for quality of life to have access to that public space. And, you know, as a city, you know, and as a citizenry, we need to continue to demand it and continue to put pressure on it. And, you know, and I think the other thing that really helps, and, you know, as public spaces get threatened, and whether it's Civic Center or whether it's, you know, 11th Avenue in Denver, is you have to use the space. You have, you know, if people don't see people out there using it, it's very easy to say, we don't need it anymore. And so, you know, we are doing everything we can right now to get people into Civic Center, and things that I wouldn't do because they would lose the Conservancy thousands of dollars, which is a nonprofit I don't necessarily want to do when my donor base is drying up. But, you know, we're running our programs this summer and we're losing money because it's that important to show that the space can still be used and the space can still be used safely. And so I think that's what I would encourage with the shared streets as well, is make sure we're using them, get images and videos out there of people using the space.
Why do you have to prove that you use it? We have a river, and we have, I think, 30% of the city area is overflow for the river, and it's not used. We only need it when there's too much water. So it's just nature, and it's public. You can have a walk, but that's it. You cannot build there. You cannot have a festival. You can't do anything else. And I think that's fine. You don't have to prove. You don't have to do anything else with that. Mm-hmm. And I just heard you say you have to prove that you use the area, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, it will be taken by other parties.
It'll be taken by other parties. It will be lower on the list of priorities for our politicians. You know, if people aren't using Civic Center, and you know, it's easy to say we don't need to pour more resources. We don't need to pour the resources, or that's an area that we can cut. Or, you know, the shared streets, you know, it's going to be very, very interesting what happens to shared streets when you need to start plowing. You know, it's all of a sudden the expediency of saving a little bit of efficiency for a fire truck or a snow plow or things like that. Are they closer to the decision maker's ear to say we need to do it? But if, you know, a neighborhood can show that they're using the shared street going through their neighborhood, much to Archie's point earlier, it's the equivalent of those 10,000 signatures showing up, you know, at City Hall. And so, you know, spaces that are temporary right now, if we show we use them, it's much harder to take them away.
I guess this conversation kind of speaks to some of the challenges in creating public spaces that are kind of, given the theme of the summit, quote unquote, for the people. You know, Archie, it seems that you mentioned that equity is a huge challenge for engaging creative public spaces. It's, you know, it sounds like use, at least in the US context, is is a challenge at being able to prove that resources are necessary to be spent in particular public spaces. I'm wondering what, outside of kind of mobilizing people, how do we come up with creative solutions to engage these challenges, to have a people-centered approach? How can we, what are some of the ways that we can continue to do that to make spaces more equitable, to keep spaces funded for people?
It's a great question. I mean, I think it's fortunately and unfortunately an extremely multi-pronged and consistent approach across the board. I think a lot of it just begins with conversation. What we see in architecture is that great ideas often die because communication around them are poor. And I think that when you have disciplines that are siloed from each other and not working together, and then those ideas are not being communicated to the public, or you're not involving the public in any sort of way, then that's a problem. I think we see in design school and definitely in the professional design world that designers are educated and designers know better, and it's my way or the highway sort of vibe. And I think that the more and more I work and achieve any level of success or build work or whatever, the more I see that way of thinking is so dead and so wrong. And I think the more that people are gathering and talking and being open and sharing viewpoints, even if they're wrong, is what needs to happen. And I think that's how things can, things can evolve and good ideas come out. And I think what happens is, in a pure example of parks in New York City, is that, if there is any amount of wealth around a park, they have the influence to decide what happens there. And, that's how it generally works. But it doesn't mean that they're all bad. So it's
right.
about figuring out how to build bridges, not burn them. And I think there's a lot of people on all sides, a minority that are trying to build bridges and a majority that are trying to burn them. So I think the building of bridges is key, and that's in design, that's in conversation and community. It's across the board. But I'm as equally as stumped as probably everyone on this Zoom call when it comes to it, because I think it's an everlasting challenge.
Yeah, Eric, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think with, people-centered public spaces, we use a phrase a lot around here is people make Civic Center. We have a wonderful architectural campus that's great and it's pretty to look at, and some of the most beautiful floral displays that you'll see at the height of summer. But Civic Center comes alive when there's people there, and so people are just so critical. And so I think as a citizenry, we have that ability to transform our public spaces. And there's a question that popped up earlier that I don't think we're going to get to, but some of my favorite examples of, how people are creative using public space is, I've termed them in my own head, these moments of joy. In normal times, we have temporary public art projects and things like that pop up and give you these moments of joy as you walk through a city, and whether that's an alleyway being converted or things like that. But one of my favorite things is, I just remember in my neighborhood in April and May, my daughter had just learned to ride a bike, so we were covering more of our neighborhood, and seeing the sidewalk chalk messages and art done by kids who probably parents wanted to kick them out of the house and give them something to do, but just how that changed a walk around the neighborhood. Or, how more murals have popped up and taken advantage of, boarded up statues or boarded up windows, is we've created more of these moments of joy in our city. And I think as individual citizens and not as organizations involved in placemaking, we can take advantage of this time to change our public spaces and to make our impact and make our imprint. And some of those things are going to live on, not all of them, but that changes people's perceptions of the space and starts to form that emotional connection, which I think is super critical in the work that I do on a daily basis.
One of our attendees is encouraging everyone to go to Crush in Rhino, saying it's a great example of public space joy. I actually just heard about this from another one of our partners in Denver, that this neighborhood, one thing that brings me joy, and I haven't even seen it, is apparently the bicycle lanes are painted with rhinoceroses on bikes. So I'm all for kind of injecting a little bit of joy into these spaces. As we finish up, some of the major themes that I think that we covered today is the importance of people in helping create people-centered public spaces, and the role that we all play in keeping these spaces active and keeping these spaces operating in ways that bring us joy and that we can use them. So I guess just as we end, what can we take away from, I think we've touched a little bit on it, but I want to build off what you were just saying, Eric, and say, what can we take away from this moment? As we've been reimagining public space in result or in response to the pandemic, what can we learn from this moment about how we change public space?
For me, I think we said it before, all of us. It really is about people, and if you you are the public, and there is space around you that you may not have realized that it is a public space, and so use it. And for me, as an organizer, that's what I constantly do. I try to see an area, and I think, okay, I can program a brass band or a dance group, and then by doing that on this location and getting the people to this place, they will have a new perception of this area. And so for me, this is planting seeds in the minds of people. And during COVID, where indoor events is like almost impossible, there is a lot of room for experiment. So I would just want to give everyone who's listening, I think there's so much possible if you just go out, and the key to success for me, especially if you keep it small, get a real connection with your city or with your officials, because if it turns into people business and you have someone in front of you who actually understands or is willing to listen to what you want to do because you are another human being, then there's both sides that want to work with you.
Or find the right conduit, right? As we were talking about Archie and Eric earlier, if you don't have the access to the official, find the right conduit to make that access. Archie, what do you think we can take away from this moment? I know that you've had to face the challenges of what your organization, what Plus Pool might be if it doesn't come to fruition, and so I'm interested in hearing what you think we can take away from this moment.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Ron nailed it. I think the only other thing I'm thinking of, well, there's many, but one thing I'll focus on is small chunks. I think the importance of doing small action collaboratively with other people is key, not to be overwhelmed and to just kind of put one foot in front of the other and take joy in it. I think that's really important. And I'm trying to actively find ways to do that, every day. Often the best ideas to move forward are not the most obvious ones. So they come by taking small steps and, talking with people.
And Eric, do you want to close us out?
That's a lot of pressure, but I think I will, echo my two colleagues here. I think, those small incremental steps are so important. We have to realize, here in Denver, and I think it applies at least all over the United States, is, government, they're called public spaces, but the government still controls them. And government by its nature is a very slow, very incremental, beat your head against the wall. You know, unless you happen to live in a city with, you know, absolutely innovative people that have been in the trenches doing this, it is citizen led. And so what is that next incremental step that you can take to move it forward and demonstrate? And I have to realize, you know, when I do that, you know, I may get 5 steps ahead and then have to take 3 steps back.
Right.
Hello, 2020. But you know, I think that's my advice is what is that next right thing? What is that next step you can take and continue to build your case and continue to demonstrate what works and learn from it. You know, I know I would love, you know, a lot better public spaces, you know, everywhere. But, you know, I realize I'm competing with a lot of other things. And so I can do the next right thing. I can do the next little thing and make what's in my universe a little bit better for everybody.
Well, I know it was pressure, but I think that was a great way to end. I think that I'm at least leaving this conversation as I walk outside my door, I think I'll be much more attentive to the way that spaces are being used around me. And also just thinking about what is my next small step that I might take. And I hope that all of the attendees will take from this. What is your next small step that you might take in reimagining the public space in the city that you live in? Thank you all so much for joining us, for taking time out of your day. Ron, for staying up past midnight to share your insights with us. I appreciate it. I just want to encourage everybody to continue to engage the programs as part of the Denver Streets Are for People Summit. And I encourage you to join us for our conversation that we're having tomorrow on creative ways of moving and navigating through the city. We'll have Fatima Sanchez of La Paz, Bolivia, to talk about the cable car system and how they responded to inabilities to create certain types of public transport there in innovative and creative ways. We'll be hearing from Eric Iverson of the city of Tempe in Arizona, in the Phoenix metro area, a very car-driven culture. And he's worked for the last 25 years to radically change the way that the city engages one another tomorrow. And this is at 10 a.m. Mountain Time tomorrow. And then Daniel Bystrom of Sweden and Andres Schneider of Berlin, both kind of creatively thinking about new forms of micromobility and how we might move around the city. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Thank you, attendees.
Thank you.
For joining us, and I hope that you'll continue to engage the wonderful events as part of the summit. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night.